A jubilant crowd overwhelmed by a landmark victory. Tens of thousands of people flooded Taipei's streets to honour their new president. After 50 years, the ruling party was out. Taiwan has embraced democracy by voting for change.
I'm very excited and proud of tonight's result because this is the first victory that the Taiwanese has chosen our own ideal president.
The next president, Chen Shui-bian, sent a clear message to mainland China as he accepted victory. Taiwan wants peace, but only on its own terms. Taiwan rejected China's plan for reunification, he said. The formula of one country, two systems suggested by Beijing wasn't acceptable to the Taiwanese. That same model has already been tested on Hong Kong. When Britain handed Hong Kong back to China almost 3 years ago, China assumed sovereignty, but allowed Hong Kong to keep its own system of government and capitalist economy. Macau recently followed suit. Now China is setting its sights firmly on Taiwan. To the leadership in Beijing, the grand reunification of China is a matter of intense national pride. They've repeatedly pledged to use military force to stop any moves by Taiwan towards independence. To them, Mr. Chen is a dangerous subversive, plotting to split Taiwan from the motherland.
If Taiwan decides to move forward to independence, and will have to confront against China, and rather to move toward a compromise, will have to force China to come up with some violent reactions.
For the Taiwanese, the aggression across the water means a constant state of alert. When Beijing starts saber-rattling on Taiwan, it sends shockwaves through the whole region. Taipei depends on powerful allies. The United States provides military hardware and a promise of support if angry words escalate into crisis. Tonight, the people of Taiwan are eager to celebrate. They're full of the joys of being a young democracy, of having the right to choose. But they're yet to find out what price they will be forced to pay for this gesture of defiance against Beijing. Jill McGivering, BBC News, Taipei.
The Trade and Industry Secretary Stephen Byers is demanding compensation from BMW to help workers who might lose their jobs after the sale of the Rover plant at Longbridge. Mr. Byers said the German company's actions had been unacceptable and it had a responsibility to help regenerate the West Midlands economy.
Like a latter-day Pied Piper trailing money and promises, the Trade Secretary Stephen Byers continued his progress through the Midlands today. The government task force, whose first meeting he attended, will have to act quickly if it's to lessen the impact of expected job losses at Rover's Longbridge plant. After the meeting, Mr. Byers called on BMW to pay compensation for what had happened at Longbridge.
They've acted in a way which most people regard as unacceptable. They've kept the workforce and the government in the dark about their intentions. And I think they've got a responsibility here which they need to discharge, and they need, I think, to join with us and make a contribution towards our efforts to regenerate the local economy.
25,000 jobs could go in the West Midlands, counting those like component makers who depend on orders from Longbridge. The government's promised £129 million in cash and fast access to new jobs and training. But will it work? Well, this factory in the northeast of England is being cited as the model. When the electronics firm Fujitsu closed it down in 1998, a government task force was set up here too. Within a year, over 90% of the 600-strong workforce found new jobs.
I think the difficulty is raising expectations too high so far as the existing workforce are concerned, and the time scale that may be involved. Obviously, the workforce aren't going to walk into jobs on day one, and as in the northeast, it took up to a year. It may take a similar amount of time.
The speed of Rover's breakup can still shock. Newspapers today contained leaflets advertising Rover cars under the slogan, "The winner takes it all," a fact of which the losers at Longbridge are only too aware. Next week, the Trade Secretary will leave his offices here for a meeting at BMW's Munich headquarters. The German company's just sold Land Rover for nearly £2 billion, so it's not short of cash. But persuading it to part with any will be an uphill task. Greg Wood, BBC News, at the Department of Trade and Industry.
Police hunting the killer of a mother and 2 children in Berkshire are still questioning a man arrested this morning. The emergency services were called to a house in Bracknell yesterday by a 999 call from one of the youngsters, but when they got there, all 3 were dead.
It wasn't until this morning that police were able to remove the bodies. 2 children and their mother who'd been stabbed to death in what the police described as an atrocious crime. Shazia Zaidi, a social worker at a local hospital, along with her 6-year-old son Zisham and 7-year-old daughter Saba, had been murdered in their home in Bracknell in Berkshire yesterday afternoon. According to the police, one of the children made a desperate 999 call during the attack. Police arrived within 10 minutes, but only to make the grim discovery.
This is a horrendous offence, or offences, absolutely tragic, with 2 small children, especially with 2 small children being involved.
While police launched a massive hunt for the killer, which led to an arrest, shocked neighbours brought flowers to the home as an expression of grief.
We just felt very sad, you know, for the mother and the children, you know. It's a tragic situation, isn't it? You know, hearing, you know, something awful just round the corner from where you live.
Police are still trying to establish a motive for the killings. They say the dead woman was a divorcee. The boy and girl were her only children. This evening, the dead woman's family issued a statement expressing their disbelief at what has happened. They also asked to be left alone to grieve their loss. Thames Valley Police, meanwhile, are continuing to question a 34-year-old man about these 3 brutal murders. John McIntyre, BBC News, Bracknell in Berkshire.
A British woman is being held by police in Turkey on suspicion of drug smuggling. The Foreign Office confirmed tonight that the 31-year-old woman was arrested at Ankara airport as she tried to board a flight to Britain. Turkish authorities say she was carrying nearly 7 pounds of heroin in packets strapped to her body. Up to 230 members of a religious sect have died in a fire at a church in Kunungu in southern Uganda. It's unclear whether they set fire to themselves or whether the blaze was started by the cult's leader. The sect, called the Movement for the Restoration of the 10 Commandments of God, believed the world would end this year. The Liberal Democrat leader Charles Kennedy has indicated a loosening of the party's links with the government. At its spring conference in Plymouth, he downplayed the significance of joint cabinet committee meetings with ministers. Our political editor Robin Oakley reports.
Showing authority in shirt sleeves is all the fashion among party leaders these days. Liberal Democrats were given free rein to quiz Mr Kennedy, and almost the first subject raised was the future of the Joint Cabinet Committee, on which their leaders have worked with Labour on constitutional reform. His predecessor, Paddy Ashdown, prized it. Mr Kennedy, it seems, can take it or leave it.
I see a continuing role for it. My genuine impression to you is that an awful lot has been made of the Joint Cabinet Committee. It's important and it's useful, but it is by no means the be-all and end-all of trying to influence the government. So it meets once in a while when there's something to be done, but I'm not fixated by it.
Delegates urged Mr Kennedy to find more women candidates. He suggested a new kind of leader's speech in future, with the public beamed in to question him.
Why not? Why not? Why should I have to stand up there for 40 minutes and go yap, 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 yap?
Today's debates ranged widely, from sheep dips to the global economy. The Lib Dems are looking for a unique selling point to sharpen their identity. Mr Kennedy hopes that green issues will do the trick in his main speech tomorrow. Robin Oakley, BBC News, Plymouth.
The Australian Prime Minister John Howard has said he's sure the Queen will be given a polite and warm welcome during her 2-week tour of the country. The royal visit comes just 4 months after Australians voted narrowly against becoming a republic and removing the Queen as their head of state. Now, with news of England's steady march towards a rugby union Grand Slam and the rest of today's sport, here's Rob Bonnet.
And a hat-trick of tries for winger Austin Healey was at the heart of England's 59-12 victory over Italy in Rome, a result which means that England are just 1 victory away from a Six Nations Grand Slam. Its consequence would be the wooden spoon for their 5th and final opponent, Scotland, whose 26-18 defeat by Wales in Cardiff today left them still without a point at the bottom of the table.
England opened the scoring with 2 penalties, but unexpectedly it was the home side with the first try. The Italian pack setting up the move. Luca Martin crossed the line and managed to ground the ball. England regained the initiative and were awarded a penalty try. Then flanker Neil Back found the ball in his hands with few options open. Ever resourceful, he chipped over a drop goal. In control at the break, England came out for the second half into their best period of the match. And the occasional glimpse of the total rugby they're looking to play helped Austin Healey to score a hat-trick of tries. This his third from a beautifully angled kick by Johnny Wilkinson. And it was Healey's beautifully timed pass which put Ben Cohen in the clear for one of his 2 tries in England's comfortable win. Their eyes are now firmly fixed on the Grand Slam. After a torrid week of recrimination over who is and who is not allowed to play for them, Wales needed a win today. Mind you, so did Scotland. But the men in red scored the first try in Cardiff, Shane Williams latching onto Alan Bateman's chip through. Scotland fought back, but Wales made the most of their chances, and Williams scored a second try to seal victory. Adam Minot, BBC News.
Now football, and Michael Owen scored in the second game of his comeback to reignite Liverpool's campaign for a place in next season's European Champions League. Owen's contribution was part of Liverpool's 2-0 victory at Derby, his first goal of the year in what's been a frustrating season.
You know, I've been scoring and coming off with a problem with my hamstring and doing other things, and it's just not quite clicked this season. But you know, I've played over 20 games this year, which surprised me when I had a look at it in the programme before the game. So it's not been such a bad year. Hopefully now I'm injury-free and can get on with the rest of the season.
Elsewhere, West Ham's Igor Stimac was sent off in his side's goalless draw with London rivals Chelsea. Kevin Davis scored both goals as Southampton beat Aston Villa 2-0. And Christian Ziger's late equaliser gave Middlesbrough a point at Sunderland. Highlights of Coventry against Bradford, Leicester versus Manchester United and Watford against Sheffield Wednesday are on Match of the Day immediately after this bulletin. If you want to see those games and David Beckham's new haircut without knowing the results, then look away now. In the nationwide First Division, Barnsley took an early lead at Birmingham with Craig Hignett's 17th goal of the season, but a David Holdsworth strike and 2 from Isaiah Rankin made it 3-1 to Birmingham. Barnsley stay third on goal difference, Birmingham stay fifth. In Scotland's Premier League, Hibernian beat Edinburgh rivals Hearts 3-1. Russell Latterby, the scorer of Hibs' first goal. The matches between Rangers and Motherwell and St Johnstone and Kilmarnock are both on Sports Scene after this bulletin, so again, if you don't want to know the scores, then look away now. And finally, Great Britain's men's hockey team have qualified for this year's Olympic Games with a 3-1 victory over Argentina in their playoff match in Japan.